Have you ever listened to our podcast, John?
Wow. Wow.
I have them queued up, and I have not.
That's
got
not
to
helpful.
them.
I mean, it's a little helpful if you've subscribed. It'd be better if you listened, but if you've subscribed, that's...
I've heard the snippets.
Hey everyone, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm joined by
Scott Nelson. I am the other host.
the ever illustrious Scott Melson.
Dr. Scott Nelson.
Dr. Scott Melson.
It's true.
And today on the pod, a new voice, someone else joining us, John Rorke. John Joseph Rorke, the 17th.
The fourth.
The fourth.
That is correct.
My apologies.
Thank you.
But like the
I'm
fourth...
from the future.
The fourth A.
A,
Right,
because
because there's another one.
he might be the fourth B
I
based
guess
on what he just described.
That's
anyway,
true.
John is on our board. He's our board member. He's our board treasurer, actually. And he is joining us today because we're a week late, but we're doing a Veterans Day episode of the podcast. And so we wanted to invite the veteran that is nearest us in our friend group. Certainly not the only one that we know, but thought it'd be nice to have you on. So thanks for joining us.
That's great. I appreciate that we're that close.
So today on the episode, we're going to certainly talk with John. And we've made jokes about your name already, but your wife always refers to you as Joe. And so I've just started referring to you as Rorke so that there's no confusion when I talk to other people.
Which is apropos if we're going to be talking about veterans things, because in the service, you are your last name.
This is true. Also in football.
Okay,
Although when I
fair
played
enough,
football,
fair
my
enough.
coach always called me Andy Moore.
Is it possible there was more than one more?
No, not on my team. It was in Minnesota. There was a lot of Krasinskis and
Gundersons?
Nice.
Gundersons, Andersons, lots of Andersons.
I didn't play football. I was on the wrestling team. I
Really?
will. I was a wrestler. I will withhold what my coach called me.
Fair enough.
That's probably for the best.
So also on the show, besides visiting with John for a little bit, we're going to also talk about what's happened thus far this week. Today we are recording this on Wednesday at about 7 o'clock in the evening, Wednesday the 15th. The House has voted. Both JCABs have met. The Senate has not yet voted, and so it's possible we might have to do a brief emergency pod, which I know Scott is really excited about.
I love emergency pods.
It'll be shorter, but we may have to do that come Friday afternoon or something. So, but we're going to start on maybe hopefully a more positive note by talking with John. Mr. Rorke, what motivated you to join the military in the first place?
I think that's a perfectly poignant question. So a lot of the folks in my family also served in the military, one capacity or other. Some of them were drafted. My godfather was in World War II. My father and his brothers were shortly thereafter. So I also went to military school, a small military school in Virginia.
For high school or college?
For high school.
Okay.
And was recruited a little bit to a service school. But decided not to go. I kind of struck out on my own. And I remember being in college. This would have been early 2003, late 2002. And there were some recruiters that had come to the school. And this was in a very liberal part of the country. And
In the Northeast?
in the Northwest, of all places.
Really?
I was living in the Northwest. at
Where
the time.
haven't you lived?
Uh,
Florida? Have you lived in Florida?
I have not lived in Florida,
All
nor
right.
do I desire
No.
to.
Me either.
It's the humidity. It's
Not a lot of Irish
personal.
Americans in Florida. Is that?
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
They retired there.
But it is very humid, and that doesn't suit me. So
Just feel like it'd be a lot of like sunburns.
Yeah. Good call.
Yeah.
Fair-skinned.
there you go.
That must be it.
There you go. So, and anyway, I was at school, and the recruiters were there, and there were a number of students that had organized a protest, and the protest took a turn for the worse, and they ended up throwing books at the recruiters. And I think I had this moment of patriotic epiphany, and thought that, well, you know, there was an impending conflict I felt like coming up, and which turned out to be true. I'm not saying I'm a prophet, just observant, I think. And I walked that day to the recruiting station and signed up.
Really? So you had like sympathy for the recruiters for being attacked and decided
I think that I had some feelings that the younger generation was not going to sign up in droves. This was post 9/11. Okay.
Okay.
I don't think I was of age when 9/11 happened, 2001. So just maybe right on the cusp. And then, but in 2003, with what I thought was an impending war coming in another country, that being Iraq, I didn't see a lot of people. Maybe I was a victim of my location and circumstance, but I didn't see people signing up in droves when I got to the recruiting station.
I think it's true. I mean, I had a cousin that signed up, but he after 9/11, but he's one of two people I've known that, well, three counting you, I guess. But yeah, it was not. Everyone saw it coming, but no one wanted to sign up.
Yeah.
Right. So I took the opportunity to join right at that time, right before the beginning of the Iraq conflict.
What branch of the service did you join?
I was in the Army.
What was there a particular reason that you chose Army versus Navy, Marine Corps, like what Air Force? What was that, like a family decision, or how did that play into it?
Well, to be fair, both of my my uncle and my father, we were from a long Army lineage.
Okay, sure.
And I was at military school. In high school, I was part of the Army JROTC, and so I knew a lot about sort of Army regulations and things that would have come into play. Put me a little bit ahead of my class there. Suppose if I had signed up to be in the Navy, I wouldn't have known as much at the time. But I did actually walk all the way to the Marine Corps recruiting office, and it was closed. And I stood there, yanking on the door or knocking on the door or whatever, and it's raining because it's the Pacific Northwest. And a guy sticks his head out from the Army office, and he goes, "Can I help you?" And I go, "Well, I'm here to sign up for the Marine Corps." And he said, "Well, come on in, get warm." And, sort of the rest is history, as they say.
Funny.
Sure.
I did Air Force ROTC for, I guess, just 1 year in high school up in Minnesota. My grandfather was an Air Force retired Master Sergeant. My dad did a brief stint in the Army, but I mean, really just 3 years. But I signed up because it was called Aerospace Science, and I was a big nerd, and I thought, that sounds cool. And then I got in, and was like, oh, it's ROTC. All right, well, I'll wear the uniform every Wednesday. It's fine. But I had no aspirations of signing up, so I applaud you on taking the initiative in the rain, going to a locked door, and still following through on that.
Yeah, sure.
No, absolutely. I echo that. So I did not do ROTC either in high school or college. I thought about it. I gave it a lot of serious consideration. I considered a couple of the service academies for college. Looked really hard at Texas A&M with the thought of being in ROTC and being in the Corps at Texas A&M, and for a variety of reasons, mostly just because my kind of reasoning ended up being, and this was after 9/11, but I don't think the conflict in Iraq was not quite as imminent as it was by 2003. But for me, the decision was, man, I'm 18, and this seems like a really long commitment, and that's something that I have wrestled with a lot for the last 15 years. That decision. Not saying I regret it. Not saying I just something that I thought about doing and didn't do, and I've looked back on that several times and been like, man, what if I kind of had gone down that path?
Well, and I think that's one of the things that maybe the armed forces doesn't communicate as well. It's like there's a ton of ways to serve, right? And somebody with a particular skill set, such as being, a doctor, a lawyer, those types of special skills. When I joined the military, I didn't have any skills. I mean, I could march, I could shoot, I could do all those things because of how I was raised, but I didn't have a skill set like you have now, and certainly nothing that was in demand to the military. And we do see all the time a need for people with special skills to go into the military and serve their time. So your time is not up, my friend.
You mean it'd still take me?
Yeah,
I gotta have to
What is the cutoff on that for when you can enlist?
So there are waivers to enlistment depending if you have one of those special skill sets.
Right.
And so I think that it's been extended. The last time I saw it was extended to 42.
Okay.
And there's always the uniform services that you never hear of, right? And one of those being the
National
Public
Health
Health
Service.
Corps.
Public Health Corps. I had no awareness of that until I started working in HIV care. And there's a a pretty significant group of public health employees in Washington, and so the first conference I went to was really like
all these people walking around in uniforms.
Yeah, and like
who are these
at the
people?
time, the woman that was the head of the HIV and AIDS Bureau was a member of the Public Health Service, and so she had like a little entourage kind of that followed her around, and it was really fascinating. So I started reading all about it, and I was like, I had no idea.
Yeah, no. Dr. Vivek Murthy, who was the Surgeon General under Barack Obama and briefly under President Trump, I was reading about him one day. I clicked on his Wikipedia page because he's like, I mean, the guy's 34, I think, 35, and is the like chief doctor for the nation, which, you know, makes you feel like you haven't really accomplished anything in your life.
Right.
I clicked on his Wikipedia page, and he's like Vice Admiral Dr. Vivek Murthy, and I was like, what? It's like, oh, so when he was confirmed as Surgeon General, it like comes with this commission in the uniformed Public Health Service Corps, and apparently it's a 3-star position.
Interesting. Well, that my predecessor at my job now is a LCSW, a licensed clinical social worker, and he went up to go work in Washington, and he said, once you're there, there's 3 types of people in like the HIV and AIDS Bureau. He said there are public health service, there are politicians, and then there's actual like clinical people. And the public health service and politicians are the ones that get promoted because one of them has a ladder to climb, like a structured system. The other one is politics, and there's more or less a system there. All the clinical folks just end up swapping around to different lateral jobs, and you might hope to get promoted once or twice in your career, but everyone else like kind of moved past you because there was a system in place. And I thought that was really interesting. He doesn't work there anymore, probably for that reason.
I can see, yeah. I can see that makes sense.
Now, LCS, that's something that carries a terminal degree and licensure like that. That is a commissionable field,
right,
for the Public Health Corps. And so if there's LCSWs out there, doctors out there, psychologists out there that are interested in serving their country, and maybe the armed services are not the way to go for them right now. The Public Health Corps is out there and is always in need of people. Is my understanding, they're always in need of people.
Sure. So how long did you serve altogether?
4 years.
4 years. And what was your rank when you discharged?
I was a specialist. I had enlisted, much to the chagrin, I think, of my father, who wanted me to take a commission out of college and instead of drop out to join. I was a specialist, which is just a lower enlistment.
Yeah. So what is the process like? So you're in college. You were a freshman or sophomore at the time?
I was a freshman.
So you're a freshman in college. You go in you go to the Army recruiting office. You sign on the dotted line. It's government, so I'm sure you signed on many dotted lines. But what's the process? Like, what happens next?
Well, you go to first of all, you try to work out what it is that you're going to do. There's a standardized test. The ASVAB, as you know, right? And that will determine what's called a general technical score, or what it used to be called. I think it's the same. And that will say, okay, you meet the basic criteria for entrance into certain fields. And then you sort of have a negotiation process where you say, okay, I want to be an infantry rifleman, or I want to be a doctor or whatever, and you have to make sure that you meet all that. And you go through a processing station, and you make as many trips down there as it takes for you to get through the process. They put us up in a hotel, and we weren't allowed to leave, and I think I spent 3 or 4 days in processing. They check your vision, your general health, and go through basically a contract negotiation with you. Say, maybe this is what we're offering, and then sign on many dotted lines.
So, and now you were I'm guess jump the gun a little bit. You weren't in ordnance disposal, right?
No.
You were in something where you like blow stuff up, right?
Well, that's right. So I was a combat engineer, which
that's right.
is the primary mission of combat engineers are obstacles, whether it's creating them or removing them. And on occasion, that allows us to employ the use of explosives. Booby traps, things like that. And then the secondary mission of combat engineers is to act as an infantryman. So we were trained to do both things. And yes, I blew many things up.
Did you choose combat engineering, or was that kind of Was that on a list of options you got to pick from, or were you kind of told that's what you're going to do? Like,
I was fortunate enough to have a good enough general technical score that I really could have done anything. Depending on the time that you enlist, there may be a bonus here or a bonus there for something that they have a shortage of folks signing up for. Engineers was not one of those things, but EOD school, which they did try, gauged my interest in.
EOD meaning
explosive ordnance disposal, and it had
like the Hurt Locker stuff, right?
Well, Hurt Locker's a movie,
right? But is that like isn't that what the movie is about?
That has
for the listeners, John. For the listeners,
Hollywood stylizations of what EOD is.
I haven't actually seen the movie.
Well,
I'm not attesting to its
so
accuracy.
You referenced it that you haven't actually seen.
I'm just saying my understanding was that for anyone. For either one of our listeners who may not know ordnance disposal,
or both of them,
that's I apologize. That sound you just heard, that was our other friend of the pod, my dog Juno, electing to walk through and shake herself. Right. So,
you do.
Thanks, Juno.
Yes, but anyway. I believe that the Hurt Locker did portray the job, explosive ordnance disposal.
Okay, that's
which became a really in-demand profession given the nature of the battlefield in the Middle East. So,
nice. I was going to ask, where did you serve most of your time while you were in the service?
I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, and I believe that I spent a total of 3 weeks in between basic training and my advanced training,
right,
and arriving in Iraq.
Wow, not very long.
So I did not spend a lot of time at Fort Hood, and we did our first deployment in 2003 and 2004. And when they decided that they were going to do rotations of troops over there, we came back for a year, and then I was on the advance party back to Iraq in 2005 and 2006. And so I probably spent more time out of the country than I did at Fort Hood.
Interesting. So were you in Iraq for most of that time then?
From 03 to 04, and then again from 05 to 06.
Okay. And from my understanding, they've shortened the stints that troops do overseas. It used to be a longer time, and now like each deployment is sorry. For listeners at home, the dog is trying to climb on my lap, and she's like a husky. Is she a husky, Scott?
We're not sure. We think that she's probably a husky Malamute mix or something.
Could be a wolf. There's a wolf on my lap.
So it's funny. We had another dog prior to Juno that he got sick, and we recently lost him about 6 months ago. We had Baron for 6 years, and for 6 years he tried to kill all of the squirrels in our backyard with absolutely no success. He didn't even get close. About 3 hours ago, Juno met me at the back door with a very dead, very large squirrel clamped in her jaws, and I never heard her bark. I never heard a sound. I don't know how she got it or when she got it, but apparently she's a much better hunter than Baron was. So maybe there is some wild dog in there somewhere.
Perhaps.
I hope my insurance company's not listening.
If they are, we'd accept your sponsorship.
And your subscription. Right?
That's right. And don't forget to rate us on iTunes. Right. Scott will appreciate that plug. So you're in Iraq for most of the time. Tell us a couple of questions. Some are serious, some are not. What is the best and worst military food you ever were served?
Wish I had more time to think about that. You kind of have to go through the Rolodex of meals that you had. And you mean something that was issued to me by the military?
Right, yeah.
As opposed to...
Not KFC in Iraq, unless it was...
Is there KFC in Iraq?
I know they have McDonald's.
Okay, well, that's a very different part than the part I was in.
Yes.
I heard they had a Burger King at a base that wasn't too far from where we were at, and we would sometimes sneak over there for hot chow. I've never had Burger King in the Middle East, but I imagine that would have been on this list under the worst. That's just a guess.
Who knows? Could be great.
So we ate a lot of meals ready to eat, especially in 2003, before there was a lot of infrastructure.
Right.
And so we ate a lot of the meals in a bag. And I remember that the number 12, which is a black bean burrito, was phenomenal, and it came with really good sauce.
All right, number 12 MRE. I may order some just to check it out.
It sounds delicious.
been-
Actually, I could go for black
Yeah,
bean
this
burrito
has
right
been
now.
14 years, so
You
whether
still-
those
you still
numbers have
remember.
changed, you might want to, before you order, before you hit buy.
Blindly order.
Yeah.
I have a number 12.
But the black bean burrito MRE was pretty good. Now the sad thing about MREs is they come as complete meals,
Right.
and there's always some element that's good in an MRE, and if they could just get it all into one version,
Right.
where the sides and the dessert are
Where it's
are
all
good,
delicious.
yeah.
As
then I
opposed to
think
like,
we'd
oh
be-
man, the main course here sucks, but the dessert's incredible.
Yeah, I think we'd be onto something there if we could get that done. And the worst one, 1 through 11 probably. No, I don't. There was a hamburger one that was pretty bad.
That's number 1.
I think it was number 8 actually.
No. Well,
And you never got to, you just got the boxes. You didn't get to pick them.
right. Right. You eat what you get.
Yeah. And so I remember that we got far more 1 through 12s because that's how they came. 1 through 12 in one box, 13 through 24 in another box. We got far more 1 through 12s than we ever got 13 through 24s, and that's why I'm more familiar with 1 through 12.
Fair enough. Maybe tell us about some of the special people you met. Now, you've told me one story that I want you to tell, because you got to drive some VIPs around.
I did. Oh, Diamond Dallas Page?
Yeah.
Okay, right. So on occasion, and it happened a lot more in the second tour once there was some infrastructure and they were able to incorporate some USO stuff. Toby Keith, by the way, who if he's listening, we appreciate that visit in 2006, I think.
Mm-hmm. That was peak Toby Keith.
Was it?
Pretty much.
I was pretty
yeah.
cut off, but
Yeah.
I do remember in hindsight that was Toby Keith that came and played a couple songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think he's done a lot like USO. I think he's done a few
Yeah, he's real
USO
big.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened was that I had a first sergeant, and I was on his security detail, and he came into we'll call it an area, where I slept one day and said, "You're on security detail, meet some VIPs over at the landing site or whatever." And I'm sitting there, with all the gear and the protective stuff and all that kind of stuff, because you got to bring vests for the VIPs
Sure.
and all that. And you're thinking maybe it's going to be the Secretary of Defense or a president
Sure.
or something like that. No, it's 6'7" or so. Diamond Dallas Page, professional wrestler from World Championship Wrestling, circa the mid
That
to late
is-
90s.
That is fantastic.
And I was to guard him for the remainder of his time.
Diamond
on that
Dallas
post.
Page needs a guard.
Several, apparently.
Just in case things get weird.
I
Someone
guess.
shows up with a folding chair out of the blue. You never know how this can go.
I mean, I'm just saying he's a 6'7" professional wrestler. Like
The Nasty Brothers are hiding
like he
behind
could-
the next corner.
he could.
The strange thing is that there were other people in that group, and I couldn't tell you who one of them were at this moment, but I do remember Diamond Dallas Page. He's a heck of a nice guy, and he challenged us to a push-up contest.
Did you, who won?
Well, there were 2 push-up contests. The first one was just a straight-up push-up contest, how many you can do in 2 minutes, something like that. Well, this is our bread and butter in the United States Army, especially in the combat arms. We do lots of push-ups, and we do them in 2-minute increments. Now, he's probably in his 50s, right? Like,
Sure.
He
He
I'm not saying
has
that
no
he's in
business
his-
getting in a push-up contest with.
A bunch of 18-year-olds.
Well, now, hold on now.
Right.
So
So you think.
right. So here's how the story goes. On the first iteration of the push-up contest, he was beaten. He
Okay.
was beaten because we could go fast and we were used to doing them in 2 minutes for the physical fitness test.
Sure. But then he demanded
Then-
a rematch with altered parameters.
Yes, he had a system. And we got to chatting, and I asked him because, for whatever he was in his mid-50s, I thought he looked great.
Sure.
I mean, he was very, very much in shape at the time. And I asked him, what he was doing to stay in shape. And he said he was developing this system of working out. And one of the things that he developed was what he called the 5-second push-up. And I hope I'm not infringing on any of his trademarks.
We're giving him free
in this,
airtime here.
Yeah. So
Both listeners are taking notes.
yeah,
That's right.
and it was 5 seconds going down into the push-up, and then 5 seconds coming back up.
It's really a 10-second push-up.
Right.
I'm just saying.
Are you going to argue with him at that point?
I'm not a branding expert, but I know a thing. It's a 10-second push-up.
Not good at the new math, but 5 seconds plus 5 seconds,
Right.
10 seconds.
Go ahead, continue.
Let's call it.
I've tried this.
Let's call it the 10-second push-up
That
for
sounds-
the purposes of this conversation.
That sounds hard.
It was very hard, and everyone that challenged him, and by the way, he keeps going, right?
It's not
He
just
takes
one.
on
Right.
multiple challengers and dispatches them all.
With relative ease.
Yeah, with what seemed like relative ease. Now, inside he could have been dying, but he didn't show it.
Right.
Okay, so I have this is a stupid question. It's got a Hollywood reference that I
Is
have.
it the Hurt Locker?
No, it's worse. It's worse.
Okay.
I'm sure it has absolutely no bearing. In fact, I'm not even so sure. It has no bearing to the actual military, other than my question. So you said that this was your first sergeant that came over and told you that you were on security detail for this. Is that right?
Yes.
There is a movie starring Pauly Shore called In the Army Now.
This is way worse than the Hurt
I
Locker.
think Andy Dick is also in that movie, right?
That's true. One of the featured characters in that movie is a first sergeant. And I have never understood what makes a first sergeant and how a first sergeant is different than any other sergeant. So that is my question. What is a first sergeant? When you say this was my first sergeant who told me I was on security detail, what does that mean?
So I think that's a great question. Probably didn't need the Pauly Shore reference to ask it, but
You could have just asked your first sergeant.
yeah. So a first sergeant, the colloquialism, of course, in the military is top. We call him top because he's top dog. And in your company, you have enlisted folks, and you have officers, and you have platoons there, and each platoon has a platoon sergeant, which is the highest enlisted person, and a platoon leader, which is an officer. And then the company of all those platoons has a first sergeant, which is the highest ranking enlisted person in the company, and then a captain who's the captain of the company.
I see. So the first sergeant is the sergeant who's the boss of all the platoon sergeants.
Yeah, that's right.
All right.
And by virtue of everyone else.
Sure.
Right.
The highest ranking enlisted person in a company?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and that is no small feat. Those are career folks.
Sure.
Typically, they have. My first sergeant, by the time of the Diamond Dallas Page incident, was a 19, 20-year guy. So
Sure.
Yeah.
They've been around. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
some would argue, and I would back them up, that they're really in charge of the company and not the captain.
I think that's talking to friends of mine that have served both in the enlisted and the commission level. That sounds right. I mean, and it's very similar to, honestly, it's very similar to kind of how things work in medicine, right? Like, so you'll have these people, folks like that finish medical school, they've got their degree, they've got their license, they're a doctor, but they've been a doctor for 6 months, and you put them on call in the ICU, and stuff kind of starts going downhill. They have a lot of knowledge, they have a lot of training, they kind of theoretically know what to do in certain situations, but I can tell you that if you're that person who's on call 6 months into residency and stuff's going bad, it's really helpful to have a nurse there who has been an ICU nurse for about 25 years to kind of, hey, this is what you want to do next, right?
Right.
Hey, this is what you need to do next, right? And I've heard that it's a very similar dynamic in the military, that you have, folks that are senior senior enlisted personnel who have spent 20, 25 years doing this, and they are essential to proper functioning of the unit.
Sort of its own little puppet government.
Right.
Sure.
It's like, to make a reference that Scott and I always enjoy, and I know you do as well, a Mrs. Landingham to a President Bartlett, or a Leo to President Bartlett.
Indeed.
Really, any of them. Anyway.
That's the West Wing, by the way.
For both of those listeners out there.
Are you a West Wing fan, John?
I was the only other board member at your.
That's true. You were at the West Wing watch party. Scott could not
Doctor.
be there.
I couldn't be there this past week. I couldn't be there.
It was a chilly. It was a good night.
I was there in spirit though.
It was
the
chilly.
Shibboleth episode.
It was.
And I thought it was phenomenal.
Yes.
And despite the cold weather, I think we all had a great time.
We did, yeah, and we're looking forward to doing some more of those in the future. And I think we've got an indoor venue lined up. More details on that to come way down the road, probably in 2018.
Did he give him the knife?
He gave him the knife.
He gave him the knife.
So I've got one more question for you, John, and
Okay.
it really is kind of a good transition point for our conversation to kind of shift over to what the topic of the day, the state legislature. So the last question I had was, how does your military experience affect your life today? What you do today? You're a social worker.
Yes.
Things have changed. You don't carry a gun every day, as far as I know.
He's a
Not
social
gonna-
worker
it's Oklahoma,
among
it's
many things.
Possible. But yeah, so how does your military experience influence and impact your life today?
I certainly think that just like the driving force behind taking a commission or enlisting in the military is, a desire to serve the country, serve your fellow country folk, and to make a difference as to the best extent possible. So you're right. As a social worker and as somebody who works pretty much exclusively in the nonprofit field, I like to think that service instilled that sense of duty to the country, the community, the folks that we work with, and those people that are in need of help. And so I think that's the thing that carried with me through, and I bet you a lot of veterans would say the same thing. That I served once when I was in the armed forces, and I continue to serve today, just in a different capacity.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
John, anything that you just want to share? Scott, any questions that you have left?
No, I'm. Thanks. Thank you. I mean, I have a ton of respect for people who choose to put on the uniform. I think that one of the many things that makes the U.S. unique, and I think there are both positives and negatives about this, and it's something that doesn't always get talked about as much as it should, but that we have an all volunteer military. No one who is in the military is there now.
Right. I was about to lean in right now.
Yeah, now. Because they were drafted or because they were coerced or because they were forced, they all made a decision at some point to join for whatever their reason was. And I think that sometimes gets lost in public discussions about defense policy, foreign policy, military interventions, how long we've been in Afghanistan or Iraq or whatever the case may be. I think something that doesn't get talked about enough is that the people who are doing that work are doing it because they chose to, and it's important to them for whatever reason. So I would just say thank you for making that choice.
You're welcome. So I enjoy Veterans Day because I get to I routinely communicate with a lot of my veteran colleagues and all that kind of stuff. And we get to have that kind of day of story swapping, and usually we break bread and get together and do something like that. But I don't think anybody is really walking around as if we've given some unpayable debt to the country, or that we need to be honored at every event or anything like that. And we all, I think, made a choice to express that service in that way at that time, and I'm just happy to have been a part of it. There were a lot of other folks that did a lot more notable, I think, things than I did, and certainly generations that came before that were involved with the draft, or I think it's a healthy sign of democracy that you have an all-volunteer army, and I just consider myself fortunate to have been a part of such a great institution with some really good people.
Yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
In the words of Lord Alfred Tennyson,
Here it is.
Theirs not to make reply, theirs but to do and die. And that's what the military was about for a little while there.
It hasn't been an evening with Joe until he's quoted Tennyson.
That's true.
I love it.
Cannons
I love
to
it.
the left? No.
I love it.
All right, well, let's take a quick break, and when we come back, the three of us will jump in and discuss the bill, House Bill 1019X. This is the bill of the week. This may be the bill to rule them all. Okay, now we're back, and we're going to talk about what happened this week so far, the first 3 days of, what do we, today was like the 18th legislative day, but this is day 178 or something?
Yeah, it's...
Really, since we started discussing the budget at the beginning of May. By my count, that's my own thing.
So one point of clarification that I feel it is incumbent upon me to make, because I think last week and the week before, we had talked about how long special session had gone on, and like at $33,000 a day, we've spent like $1 million, like 1.2.
It's not that
so
high.
It's not that. So it's actually, as of today, it's like right at $500,000.
Right.
Because it's only $33,000 a day per legislative day.
Which is a day that they gavel in.
Yeah, right. That they gavel in and gavel out. And as you said, today is day like 18, 19, 20, something like
18.
that. So,
but like Monday, they gavelled in and gavelled out just right away. And that was,
Right.
so it counted as a day.
right.
Which...
It's still not ideal
still
that we've
irritates me.
spent $500,000 of our tax money for the shitty results that we're getting. Sorry, Andy. He's going to have to believe that later. But it's better than, $1 million, I guess, or 1.1.
Yeah, I mean, if we're
two,
spending
whatever it was.
$500,000 in order to raise, $400 million, that seems all right. But that's not what we're doing.
I was going to say, except that that's not what's happening.
So what we could have done.
So today today the House passed a bill. They passed Bill 1019X. So this is the what is it getting called on Twitter? The slash and
dash.
That's right. So this is
Cash and cuts.
this is the plan. This is the Plan B that you might have heard about. Plan A failed last week. That was the bill that
Failed by 5 votes.
could not muster 76 votes in the House to
5
raise
votes down.
gross production tax, and a variety of other revenue measures. So this is a bill that enacts a 2.44% across-the-board cut for state agencies, with a few agencies being either held harmless or fixed cuts that are at a lesser percentage.
Right.
There is some revenue in this bill, but none of it is from... Well, this kind of gets into the weeds a little bit. Not very much of it is from new recurring revenue. There's of revenue that's in this bill. There's $23.3 million from the Constitutional Reserve Fund. That's the rainy day fund that we talk about. There's $23 million from fiscal year 17 carryover funds. Where this comes from is the legislature, by law, as part of our Constitution, is only allowed to appropriate 95% of what the revenue certification is for the upcoming fiscal year. Okay, so for instance, if OMES, the Office of Management and Enterprise Services, and the Treasury certified that revenue for fiscal year 18 was supposed to be $100 million, then the legislature could only appropriate $95 million.
It's to give a cushion.
However, if actual money coming in exceeds that $95 million, that becomes what's called a carryover fund that can be appropriated later.
Right. And
so,
if it's less than that,
it's a revenue
95,
failure.
then it's considered a revenue failure. Then we get mid-year cuts,
Right.
which has happened the last
2 years, yeah.
and twice last year.
Right.
Once this year, twice last year.
So what happened is that there was some revenue has come in recently this quarter, a little bit higher than expected. There's $23 million available from that, so they've appropriated that in this bill. So that's 46.3. They're rating $60 million from revolving funds. I use the term rating. Several legislators in debate today used the term theft. Some other legislators objected strongly to that.
Some other legislators think that this is their money for the taking.
That's true.
I would disagree.
So that's $100 million, and then there's roughly $48.5 million from a gross production tax increase on the legacy wells bill. Now that's in here, but I thought that was a separate. bill that they'd passed and hadn't been passed by the Senate, right?
Right. They have to pass that as a revenue bill by itself.
Okay.
The revenue cannot be rolled into the appropriations bill.
But they're appropriating that 48.498, assuming it's going to pass the Senate.
Right. And that is it's a revenue increasing bill. I mean, it increases revenue, but it is removing an incentive rate, and thus it only requires 51 votes to pass, not 76 votes.
Right.
So this is really the only revenue increasing thing that they've really tried, that it's only 51. There's some other options out there that they could have changed some other things with 51 votes, and they didn't even talk about it.
Right.
Capital gains, combined corporate reporting, a number of things.
Capital gains is another $100 million a year. I mean, like
Right.
we talked about that, and it's
That only benefits the rich.
right.
Hey-o.
So, Andy, we talked about that it's across the board 2.44. Looking at the bill summary, I don't think there's anybody that gets cut to more than 2.44.
No,
who gets less than a 2.4% cut?
So the education does common education, so K through 12. Higher ed gets the 2.44. DMH, the Department of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Services, they are getting less. So the three agencies that were going to have the big devastating cuts,
Right.
they are not getting those cuts.
Right.
Also, the Department of Health is not getting a cut because they are getting a $30 million emergency appropriation.
So they can literally pay their employees.
Yeah, so
But that has nothing to do with this.
this
bill.
has nothing to do with
Yeah.
this, not directly. That has
It's in the bill, but it's
and it has to do with the annual cuts, more or less. That the Department of Health has had about a 28% cut to their budget over the last 8 years. Just like 80% of state agencies have been cut by nearly half, by 45% over the last 8 years, which is bananas to me. State agencies have about half as much money as they did 8 years ago. And if you adjust for inflation, it's probably, right at half. And we're still providing services as best we can.
And we still heard at least one legislator today railing about waste and mismanagement and inefficiencies. And I have to tell you that this is one of the things that for me makes the Department of Health situation so frustrating, is because there clearly has been waste and abuse and mismanagement at the Department of Health. And for that to occur right now is terrible, just because it's terrible that it happened. But it also feeds this narrative that, oh my God, that's happening at the Department of Health. Where else is this happening that we don't even know about?
Right. Well, tourism for one, but and I think, just as a side, I need to look into this more. But I think that tourism is under the jurisdiction of the lieutenant governor, because that's part of his deal.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right.
So I need to look into that because that might have implications on the governor's race. But if I could, a point of personal order about the health department, if I may. It's easy to point fingers and say that there's waste there because funds were misused.
I know where you're
And
going.
that's true. So what happened is they used federal funds to pay for state costs because
the state didn't give them the money they needed.
right. So the state cut money to the Department of Health year after year after year, and the state Department of Health didn't cut services. Like they didn't cut people or programs like they should have, right? They should have cut some things and they didn't. They just kind of covered it up, and it sounds like they just out and out cooked the books and like lied about it on paper, which may have criminal implications, I think, for at least some individuals that are no longer there.
Yeah.
But yeah, because the amount that they've lost is about what they're short now. So they're trying to get the money up so they can kind of get everything back to zero and then keep going. So they're still furloughing everybody, including those that are federally funded because
they misappropriated the federal dollars.
Because
the federal dollars are gone at that point.
They were used for something else.
Right,
And
so you can't use them to now pay
right.
the
You
federal
can't. Right. The way I said
employees.
I talked to my staff about it today, and I said they essentially robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then when Peter was due to be paid back, Paul was broke. Like he didn't get his paycheck, and he's like, "Hey, man," it was essentially payday lending, right? Just on like a grand scale.
On a $30 million public agency tax dollar scale.
Yeah, and it was some programs. My hunch is they started some programs that they shouldn't have that weren't actually funded but this is indeed fodder for those members of the legislature that would like to see line item budgeting and appropriation so they could really get their hands in there and decide what the health department and other agencies do with the money.
Hashtag small government.
Yes, hashtag small government, because these are also folks, as I said the other day, who really think that government should be small and have their hands not on things. But
well, and just one, and this just really, I mean, I there's no other way to say it other than this just kind of pissed me off today. Listening to one of the representatives that was debating in favor, he was debating in favor of House Bill 1019 and basically saying that tax cuts should never ever happen. He said at once, we shouldn't raise taxes because it's been tried over and over and over again and we know it doesn't work. He then went on to say that we haven't raised taxes since 1992 in the same debate. He then went on to say that there's all this fraud and abuse and mismanagement. One of the representatives made the point that this is happening in the Department of Health, maybe not solely because, but in part because of things unfunded mandates. An unfunded mandate for both of our listeners is when the government demands that something happen, right? The legislator passes a law that says, hey, state agencies, you have to do this, but then doesn't give them any money to do that, right?
Right.
So one of the reps was railing against waste and abuse and then proceeds to introduce a bill saying that the Oklahoma Highway Patrol cannot furlough troopers, cannot impose mileage limitations on where they can drive, but doesn't want to give them any additional money.
Right.
I don't.
And it's funny because those two things are, mileage isn't a fixed cost, but it has a definite. It's not like they can just they can buy cheaper pens or use less paper or whatever.
Right.
Like
this is where their money goes: salaries and gas.
Well, I mean
it's fringe benefits, right? I mean, it's salary and fringe benefits.
Right.
It runs a department or an organization 15, 17, 20% of the cost of the salary just to accommodate for things like payroll taxes, all the way through, possibly, if that's in your budgeting, mileage. And, especially for your people that are sort of remote employees that are, kind of out and about.
Sure.
Like the highway patrol.
Right. Who patrol the highways around the state. It's also protect elected officials and the Capitol and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
They
have kind of an important job.
They do. So the other thing about a lot of those state benefits is that they are for state employees because that's what's laid out, maybe not in the Constitution, but in statute that apply across the board. So you can't make changes in one agency that don't, to make them out of line with all the other agencies, right? Like they kind of have a standard package. And so it's not like, we'll just stop giving them vacation time.
Right.
Like
you
can't do that. And so the problem with bureaucracy, right, is that on one hand, it creates jobs because we put in checks and balances to make sure that we do things correctly or to make sure that things have oversight. And it takes people to provide oversight. Right. And those people have to be paid, and then you get, like boards or commissions and everything. Nothing isn't for free, and so it's, the reason. What was one of the departments they were talking about today? Used to have, like an oversight commission, but they cut it because of funding, and then there was some waste or fraud, and it's like, well, but you cut it. Was it criminal justice? You seem uncertain about that.
I mean, that sounds right.
It was a department. And I remember you talking. I remember
there were a lot. I was kind of in and out on listening to it today. Also, another point of personal privilege here. Scott rolls his eyes at me.
No, not at you. At what you're about to say. I think I know what you're about to say, but
is that I just wish that the legislature would update some of their IT services to the 21st century. It would not be that expensive. And I know that like the Wi-Fi and some things in the building are going to be upgraded as part of the restoration.
Right.
But like House and Senate have entirely different systems. That's why they have different like nomenclatures for their emails. Right. They have different. It's all on separate servers, and one of them like archives all the video. The other one doesn't. The streaming capabilities are really crummy. I can watch a Tesla rocket fly into space without a blip. It's constant service.
Yeah.
Flying 20,000 miles an hour into space, and land again while the rockets fire and it barely gets blurry. I can
you
watch it
can't
on my
watch your
phone,
government.
but I can't watch the guys 6 blocks away talk to one another on a stationary floor.
Yeah, that is a very valid point. I thought you were going to.
I sounded really angry about that.
I thought you were going to reference the accusation that OU spends part of its higher ed dollars encouraging students to have abortions, and UCO spends.
Did they say that today?
Yeah, same guy. Just for those playing the home game, we're talking about Representative John Bennett. This was his debate today, not Forrest Bennett, John Bennett.
Who, by the way, was the only person not to vote the other night.
Yeah, I don't know
Did
where
you
he
notice
was.
that?
I did.
Apparently that he was dealing with a family situation.
Okay.
I haven't heard details what it was.
And
But
we try not to call out legislators by name. I think this Jay Bennett is a bit of a lightning rod for attention by everybody. And maybe we shouldn't give him that airtime.
I mean, and that's a legitimate. I think that's a legitimate point.
If we have any listeners in Salazar who would like to run for office from any party,
Right. Well, I even debated like whether to put his name out there. Part of it is I just get tired of saying one legislator, one representative, this legislator, this
because people want to know who it was.
Yeah.
But if anyone,
and it's not like it's not public record, right? I mean,
and it's
you
probably
can go,
true that our 2 listeners were watching the debate
right?
anyway.
Like you can go look. It's just, but I mean, it's just really frustrating to rail on, that there's this abuse and there's this waste, but then also here in the very next breath, we don't have any idea how they're spending their money. Well, then how do you know there's all this fraud, waste, and abuse, right? And you should, but just I would throw out there, you should know how they're spending their money, right? Every single year, OMES, the Office of Management and Enterprise Services, every year prepares a comprehensive annual financial report. That is part of their responsibility. It happens every single freaking year, and it's available for you to read. The state auditor inspector do a single audit report every single year. This is required of all activities that involve any federal dollars at all, and we get a fair number of federal dollars in Oklahoma. It's not like there's not any resources out there for you to know how agencies are spending their money, particularly when allocating dollars to agencies is part of your job. Okay, so I'm just saying, for any representatives that are listening, if you don't have any idea how state agencies are spending their money, you can find out without having to conduct an independent, specialized audit of every single state agency. I'm not saying that nothing's ever going to get missed. Obviously, the Department of Health is an example. But again, like you mentioned, it appears that it's not that there was a lack of auditing going on at the Department of Health. It's that the people that were running the department lied, right?
Yeah.
They cooked the books. They didn't account properly, and it wasn't caught because there was an intent to deceive.
Well, and that's the other problem with that bill. And I know, John, you had a comment, but with the health department, so they're going to give them the $30 million, but they have to promise to cut $15 million next year, and that's, I have mixed feelings about that. They're going to have to just lose the programs they should have lost slowly over the last 10 years. Right. They're going to lose them all at once, and the personnel. So I think one of our board members may be affected by that if he hasn't left already. But go ahead.
Oh, I was only making, a question. You mentioned a single audit being a mandated process for agencies receiving federal funds. I think there is like a baseline for that. Like you do have to receive $750,000.
Okay.
Ooh. Here's what I like about our podcast is that I learn something every week too. And also I'm going to highlight for listeners at home that Scott has a binder.
I do.
Binder full of, you have highlighting too?
I thought we were making it a practice not to call things out.
I do.
If people here at the table, it's okay.
Well, I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with having references.
There's nothing. You were, as I've said from the very beginning, you were very prepared. The very first time we recorded, John, we were upstairs at Scott's house, and our table was a
guitar case.
Guitar case on top of a trash can, and Scott laid papers out. He was putting them around like one microphone between us, and so the picture I have of him like getting into it with his arms in the air and just paper all around him. It was a good scene.
You see, the more the references, the more animation you get out of Scott Melson on these podcasts.
This maybe,
and I'd also like to add that we got here and there were handouts.
There were, yeah.
So we actually have
bill handouts, which
right now.
This was not unlike JCAB, where they received the bill the moment they walked into the room, so did we. However, I'd actually seen it for a little while longer than the representatives who had to vote on it this week.
And my handout wasn't 57 pages.
It was not. And to be fair, to the hardworking staff at the state capitol who have to prepare these things, my hunch is like the leadership, or whomever makes decisions and says, all right, go type it up. And then whoever has to type it up has to like crank it out in that legalese language. And that's a really difficult thing to do under the gun when it's like, man, it's late. Like I got a family I got to go home to. You guys can't get your act together. And so really hats off to all the hardworking staff and to, the legislative assistants who have to field phone calls from all of us.
Yeah.
And on everybody. And they get questions about things that they can't do anything about. People get mad at them. It's not their fault. They do have to, like anyone, has to do a lot of work. And they are some of the most knowledgeable people. Anyone I've met who used to be a legislative assistant,
they know what's going on.
Knows what's going on and who's doing it and all that. So,
and to be fair, these are folks that are affected when you have to have special sessions, right?
Right, they got to come in and
they're folks that had this part of the year block off to do probably other things.
Yeah,
and
right.
And they're here doing
trying to prepare their Thanksgiving dinner and get family organized, and here they are having to type up bills late at night.
Yeah, and so our hats off to them.
Absolutely,
working through this.
So
at the end of the day, this is the bill that passed. Like it passed the House.
Passed narrowly. What was the final vote?
56-38 today, and it will go to be heard by the Senate tomorrow.
Just not all of it.
Not all of it.
So the Legacy Wells goes tomorrow.
Oh, and then the rest goes Friday.
Goes Friday.
I'll tell you. Looking at I watched this week the questions, the debate, and the votes both in JCAB and on the floor. I think it'll pass the Senate. I'm not 100% convinced it'll pass the Senate. I think it will.
Yeah, it'll be.
But it is not a slam dunk.
No, I imagine it'll be close again because there were a lot of people that voted yes for the big budget bill the other day. They voted no on this bill. Obviously, we had 71 people that voted yes for the other bill, and only 56 that voted yes for this. I think that is really interesting and really indicative of maybe where people's attention lies.
No, 100%. And it's. I was kind of struck by the debate today because you had, I think not for the first time. This was true on the revenue bill last week. There were people debating against this measure today from both parties on both sides of that. Representative Thompson followed Representative Bennett and had, I think, a fairly stirring debate.
He's a good guy
against this. He also, it was just funny to me because he got up after John Bennett and he was like, "Yeah, I'm sorry. Just give me a minute. My head's kind of spinning a little bit from that last debate." Which
it's funny when they throw shade on the House floor.
Yeah.
They.
Dude, Eccles is throwing shit on the House floor.
Yeah, he was pretty upset. So I heard him on KOKC right afterwards. I didn't catch a whole of the debate, but I listened to the radio this afternoon and caught his interview on there with Jason Doyle and Chad Alexander
that we were on with.
We were on a few weeks ago, and he probably had a couple of hours to stew on things and let some of it trickle out. And he made a good point that he doesn't understand people who voted no on both bills because it's like, okay, you don't like option A, you don't like option B.
Yeah.
What are you holding out for? There's nothing else, man. Like that's it.
It's a reasonable question.
Yeah, Chad made the same point of like, you got to vote for something. Like, but there's folks up there where we vote no for anything. So, all right. So presumably it'll pass the Senate. Maybe close.
I think so.
I think it'd be fun to take a prediction.
I was about to say that too.
Maybe bring in guest pickers sometime.
Right, yeah. We can't put this on Predict It.
You want to be your first guest picker right now.
So what are we talking, Thursday or Fridays?
So we gotta see, do we think that the Legacy Wells, which we've decided is not only the name of this bill but also the name of a subdivision in Edmond that Andy and I are going to develop. Legacy Wells.
It should be.
No, it's good. We're going to develop it. Like, this is our business plan to support the pod because we only have 2 listeners.
Streets like Kingfisher and I don't know.
Comanche.
Yeah.
Comanche Road.
There's a neighborhood down near Houston, like in the Cypress Fairbanks area in northwest Houston, out on 290, and it's I had a friend that lived in there, and all the streets. It's like they had two word banks of like adjectives and then plant names.
Yeah.
And so it's like Whispering Daisy and Misty Oak and stuff. They're all real funny.
I think there's either a piece of software out there that generates these names, or there's a company, and if so, where do I sign up?
Right. Yeah.
So
I have no shortage
like
of
paint colors.
adjectives to throw together.
just because I always want to throw in a West Wing reference anytime I can, or a West Wing weekly podcast reference. If you don't listen to that, guys, you should. So Mrs. Landingham was President Bartlett's secretary. And the West Wing Weekly guys created a random name generator to come up with potential replacement secretaries for President Bartlett. And the names are, because they like put in some specific parameters, and all the names they came up with were like Landingham or Devonshire or it was
all very British sounding.
Yeah, and it's very similar, I think, to some of these like subdivision names out in kind of more the suburbs. You just think like, where did they come up with this? But
all right, so we've got two bills in two places it's got to pass: the Senate and then the governor's got to sign both of these bad boys. So the legacy wells and then the budget itself. John, what's your prediction on? I don't know how to do this. Percentage chance that it passes?
Just maybe set a percentage or do an over under.
Let's go. How many votes do you think it will garner from the Senate?
Okay.
So if there's
Legacy Wells Thursday.
Legacy Wells Thursday from the Senate. How many votes? There's 48 seats, but 2 of them are new, so there's 46. 46 possible.
36.
36 says John. Scott?
It's gonna pass with 40 in favor, 60 against, 6 against.
40. Okay, Scott, John, 36, 40. I will say 34.
Okay, conservative.
Right. Conservative. And then we'll go in reverse order this time, just to be fair. So for the budget bill, I say we'll pass. I'm going to go back. Anybody want to reconsider the vote on the first one? No?
I'm going to stick with 36.
All right.
What did you said? What you said? 36.
I said 36.
36 and 10, right? 36.
Yeah.
And you said what? You said 30.
I said 34. We need half of 56, which is 28. I'm gonna say.
You know what? I
you came in heavy there.
I
Scott.
did. I had neglected to consider that this is a revenue-raising measure.
Yeah, but
it only requires 51%. So I'm actually going to go the other direction. I'm going to say 30. I'm gonna back off and say 32.
You're saying 32. You're going lower, huh?
32-14.
All right. All right. So on the budget. Sorry. So let's back up. Legacy Wells. John says 36 yes. Scott says 32 yes. I said 34 yes. We're pretty even there. And then on the budget, I'm going to say 32 on the budget. Yeah, 32. 32 on the budget. What do you guys say?
Doctor,
give me the news. I got a bad budget bill for you.
31.
31. I was going to come in at 31. I should have
31.
taken my opportunity. No. You know what? I'm going to, and so you're at 32.
Yeah.
The doctor's at 31. I'm going to do the Price is Right thing here and go, I'm going to go 30.
30.
Just to undercut.
That's what I almost changed it to.
I think 31 is a good, I think they're all good guesses.
All right. So then the next one's just yes or no.
Does the governor
pass,
sign it?
pass or not from the governor, which is, I heard today someone that said she might not. She said she won't if it contains just cuts.
Brett Begancy, is that how you say his last name? From KOC's with KOCO. He put out today, and I got to agree, everything that Governor Fallon was putting out on social media today suggests that she is not a fan of this
She's
package.
not, but
now she has said not once, not twice, but I think 3 times now that there are bills that she would veto, and that hasn't happened yet. So, I mean, you gotta. I don't know. Am I first this time? Do I go?
yes, go for it, Scott.
I would say the governor. She will sign the Legacy Wells bill.
Yes, and then go for budget too.
Yeah, she will.
Mr. Rorke points at me. I'll say she signs both with a strongly worded press release following.
Oh, nice. That's like your own personal signing statement.
Well, I mean, we all know it's going to happen from everybody, right?
Right.
That's an interesting spot I'm now in, right? So I'm inclined to initially agree with both of you, but to
You want to disagree just for the sake for drama?
well, we'll make it a little interesting, right? It's not fun if we all do the same. Then we're not playing for anything, right? So I'm gonna say that she does sign legacy wells,
Right.
and does not sign the budget.
All right, so
interesting. I think that if it goes any way that's kind of unexpected, that's the way it's going to go. I think you're right.
So what happens if she doesn't sign it? And we'll kind of wrap up here.
It will come back. The question would be, do they have enough to override the veto if she were to veto the budget? And I don't really think that they do.
Right. Man, we haven't seen that in a while.
Right. So they'd have to. So interestingly, it takes more of a majority to raise taxes than to override a veto. It only takes a 2/3 majority, I think, to override the veto. So it'd be 66 in the House. I don't think that they have that. I don't know. I mean, it passed 56-38 today. I don't know if they could find another 10 votes.
Yeah, man. And if they don't, December 1st is just around the corner. They'd have to hustle and work weekends.
I think in that case, what I think would happen, I think that if she was to veto, it comes back. They cannot override the veto. I think they would go back to Plan A. I think they would introduce another version of the original revenue package that has
That's interesting.
the cigarette tax, gross production tax on it. I think that's what they would do.
But
because I think it is more likely you could move that vote from 71 yeses to 76 yeses. It's more likely you could move that vote than it is that you could move 56 to 66 on this package and override the veto.
That's fair. I think that's probably true. You can probably twist 5 arms about that one thing that had such broad support easier than you can this.
Especially because half the people that voted no are people that have pretty lucrative, I shouldn't say lucrative, pretty choice committee chairmanships, right? If leadership really wants to move that vote, you say, hey, you vote my way or you're going to lose your chairmanship. Which sounds like you're playing dirty politics, but that's something that happens all the time.
That's funny because now I'm like, ooh, that would be kind of cool. When normally I'm like, oh, that's bad. But
that's a very common way, both at the federal and state level, for leadership to kind of exert their
except
will
for some
on
of
the
these
caucus.
folks are on the way out anyway, and they don't really care if they lose their last year.
Well, there's some protest votes in there, right? Like there's some folks that are like, I won't be back, so
Right, and there's rumors.
legacy votes.
Yeah, well, and there's some rumors that there was some horse trading going on behind the scenes. That like, if you give me 5 yeses, I'll give you 5 more nos, and that it was, Representative Osborne kind of said from the beginning this was orchestrated to fail. Representative Eccles took issue with that on the radio today, and I think on the floor, from what I understand.
Yes.
And you know what? I don't know. I wasn't in those meetings, so I could believe it both ways. I mean, it could whatever.
If Governor Fallon was to veto, I think that's what happens. I think it goes back to the House. They don't have another 10 votes to override the veto. They go back to the original revenue package. I'll go for Rorke here. They go back to the original bill, and it passes.
As is.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Dun dun dun.
That's all contingent on what I think is a pretty unlikely scenario that the governor exercises her veto power.
Listen, for the sake of the mental health of millions of Oklahomans and the number of antacids I have to consume during this, and for our friends in the media and everyone else, I just want it to end soon.
Yes.
Because
December
1st is 2 weeks from today, right?
Fact.
And if this or something else doesn't pass by December 1st, those 3 agencies have to cut.
Yep.
It can, as long as that's passed, they're okay. But that means, and because there's those delays in there, they'd have to come back. We won't know Friday. They'd have to come back Monday and like really hustle, and then maybe
they might. They might have to come back over the Thanksgiving weekend. Like it's not.
Yeah, they can do it on like a Saturday or Sunday. But
like they'd have to come back potentially on like that Saturday or.
Man, that is just political suicide.
And it's interesting. I mean, the Governor Fallon said last week that it was, I think, by far her most strongly worded statement. She was like, I don't care. Like we will. She's like, I'll stay here till Christmas. Like it does not matter.
Oh, that's right.
To me. And again. It's a little kind of a girl who cried wolf situation, right? Like she's said repeatedly that like she's threatened the veto and hasn't exercised it. But this wasn't a tweet. This wasn't a prepared statement. This was
just off the cuff
on the rotunda in a Q&A with reporters. Like I don't find this acceptable at all.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will post our predictions here maybe tomorrow morning. We'll see what happens. I guess we're all eyes on the Capitol this weekend.
Hey, Joe, thanks for coming in, man.
Oh, thanks for having me. I thought we had a great time.
We appreciate you being a guest on the pod. If you could become a listener, that would also be just awesome.
I'm listening to you right now.
All right. So that brings us to the end of this episode. Big thanks to John Rorke for being with us tonight. You can connect with us on Twitter and Instagram. We are at Let's Fix This OK. Andy, is at AndyOKC. Scott is at SC Melson. John is not on Twitter. And you can also like our Facebook page at facebook.com/Let's Fix This OK. Our website is letsfixthisok.org. And you can sign up for our newsletter, read our blog, find details about upcoming events. We're going to be doing a Christmas card event like we did last year for legislators, probably in December. I don't have that date yet. Our podcast is edited and produced by Scott and myself. And thanks to Scott's wife for letting us use her dining room to record tonight and last week, and I think the week before that. We are a member of the Mostly Harmless Media Network, and our theme music is provided by the Sugar Free All-Stars. And as a reminder, Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, non-profit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with their government. We encourage you to get involved in any way you can. Remember, decisions are made by those who what, John?
We're the squeakiest wheels.
Squeakiest wheels. That's pretty close.
Oh my God. Decisions are made by those who show up. So show up.